We will talk about the liquid cooling technology, and it seems that we need the liquid cooling technology. There's no way, right now to operate without, considering the solution, right? And the case is that there are so many solutions in the liquid cooling space, or at least there are so many new vendors coming, lots of new products from China, people, which will deliver you everything you want. But the case is that everything can be done, not everything can be done properly. And we are the guys who are doing that properly. And I won't talk about the products. There will be probably lots of other solutions which will talk about the products. I will talk only about considerations about the practical applications of the liquid cooling technology. Now, I will start with this slide from Vincent Zhang from WhatsMiner. It was in Dubai last week. He told about the new WhatsMiner models, the new miner which will come into the market. So, first of all, as you can see, those people are planning to operate on the 80 degrees Celsius temperature levels. That's what you should consider thinking about the future miners. There will be no miners in next 2 years which will run on the lower temperature level, right? So we need to consider what will come to the market, what will be available. Secondly, what's pretty important, I just actually enlarged the part of that presentation, new miner models which are supposed to come to the market are in the range from 5 kilowatts to 10 kilowatts. Right? There will be no less probably available, or that will be not viable, in terms of the cost effectiveness to operate on the less efficient miners, right? So that's another consideration. So the status or the situation is like that. We have the 4 miners models right now, which are built for the liquid cooling solution for the hydro cooling, right? And we have 2 miner models. We have 2 miner models which are actually dedicated for the either immersion cooling or widely used for the immersion cooling. I'm talking about M56 and S19 miner, which is widely used for the liquid cooling technology. And those miners should operate in the temperature level from 60 degrees Celsius to 80 degrees Celsius, which is 176 Fahrenheit, which is a lot, right? And you should expect 10 kilowatts, right? So we can assume that the future miners will actually be defined by the liquid cooling technology. There will be no future miners in that power level which will be air cooled. That's not possible, physically. And the case is that the liquid cooling technology is known since decades actually. Right? So as you can see here behind me, you will see the supercomputer, 60 megawatt supercomputer. Built in Illinois. That's Aurora supercomputer, and that's Argonne National Laboratory, and they operate that system in the 60 megawatt capacity. It will be operated for another decade, right? So how those people doing those liquid cooling technology and don't fail? Asking because we saw many failures on the market. The immersion mining or crypto mining community embraced liquid cooling technology and went full scale, obviously, because with the crypto mining everything is big. The minimum size of the operation 1 megawatt, right? Or 10 megawatts or 200 megawatts, right? We saw that. But there were also failures. We saw people choosing the technology without too much of consideration and then failing. And in that situation in which we are right now, the case is that the standards are there. So we have the standards, ASHRAE standards for liquid cooling solution, for the liquid cooling applications. The knowledge is there. The problem is that not much people are actually, looking into the standards or built according to standards. So, the liquid cooling market right now, or the immersion cooling market, looks like that. So the cheapest pipes you can get, the cheapest tanks you can get, the cheapest fluid you can get, and, the very, very simple build. And lots of errors, mechanical errors, if you're thinking about, how the tank should be built. So the situation is that the large-scale operators will have to implement liquid cooling technology. There's no other way, right? the miners are completely dependent on the effectiveness, on the performance of the high availability uptime of the liquid cooling system, right? You cannot, run the system right now, converse easily to air cooling. Not possible, right? If your liquid cooling system will stop, you'll get losses, and that losses will go into the millions, right? And so the liquid cooling technology is basically the critical part of the mining operation, and that this is something what we should think, ahead. Now we have the problems that there's not much know-how on the market. You actually need experts. Normally, there is a implementation of the liquid cooling system requires lots of planning, but in the crypto mining space, it's like, can you ship 2 megawatts within 3 weeks? Yes, we can. Okay, I am taking. This is this current situation. People are buying without, too much consideration, the available solution, and that was done. And this is what was happening for the past 2 years. So, and there is no maintenance procedures in place. So we will talk very briefly and very quickly about the very broad topic. So how to deliver a liquid cooling system which actually works. So let's start from the direct chip cooling systems. We have 2 flavors, right? Hydro cooling, which is called the direct chip cooling or direct liquid cooling, and we have immersion cooling, right? So with the direct chip cooling, we have few important components. We have few critical features and considerations. And the most would be how to plan the system properly, how to choose the materials properly, how to design the whole loop, how to implement the system which doesn't have galvanic corrosion, and how to achieve the expected fluid chemistry, which is critical part of the whole system. Obviously, there will be mistakes. There will be lots of mistakes, and one of the bigger mistakes is that people are basically jumping into deep water because they just want to have that done, right? That's one of the problem. The problem is the lack of expertise. So we have lots of investors which are hiring some local plumbing company, buying the immersion system or direct chip cooling system from the vendor like Bitmine or WhatsMiner, right? And they don't have the single point of contact. They're actually acting as a, let's say, investor, but also as a, let's say, expert who should intermediate between those, 2 companies which doesn't have the idea actually about how to deliver the proper liquid cooling system. So, and obviously the expertise is limited, there are only mostly startups. We are a startup, right? We are, let's say, pretty experienced because we are coming from the data center market, but we are also startup. So you can choose you can choose one startup or other startup actually. And one of the problem with the direct chip cooling system is that there is not enough planning, and there is lots to talk in terms of the finding proper CDU, choose the right materials for the technical cooling loop and facility cooling loop, choose the wetted materials for the system, right, and so on and so forth. One of the biggest mistakes which people are doing, thinking about the direct chip cooling system or hydro cooling system, is, for example, avoiding the proper standard which ASHRAE, so the Association of the HVAC Engineers, defined a few years ago, the dividing between the facility cooling system and the technical system. So, and the current systems which are available on the market, you will see the solutions from WhatsMiner or from Bitmine, they are running on the same loop against any standard. They're just running the same loop, open loop mostly, through the miners, to the cooling tower. Right? And then you have a big problem because, dividing the system into 2 loops allows you to maintain different coolant chemistry, different coolant quality, different pressures, different fluids on both, in both loops. It's very important to keep that standard, alive, because this is what, avoiding that will basically result or will affect in the big problems in the future, mostly in the maintenance, in the long-term maintenance of the system. So that's pretty important. Another item will be to choose properly materials for the facility cooling system or technical cooling system. We see lots of CPVC, very cheap piping, very cheap support structure, lots of errors, lots of mistakes. It should be done properly, especially taking into the account those temperatures which you mentioned, right? So 80 degrees Celsius, 175 Fahrenheit. That's important. Another issue is completely forgetting about the maintenance procedures. So you thinking about the liquid cooling system, any system, liquid cooling or immersion cooling, you need to perform the long-term maintenance of the solution. There's at least 40 to 60 steps which you need to, or let's say checks, which you need to do. So checking the turbidity of the water, checking the quality of the fluid in the technical cooling system and in facility cooling system. Lots of checks to be done, and that should be repeated every 3 months, or if we are thinking about the open loop, so cooling tower, even every single month. So that's one of the considerations. Another let's say consideration would be choosing the right heat rejection device. It could be closed loop dry cooler. It could be adiabatic dry cooler. It can be free cooler chiller with the adiabatic option for the Middle East implementations, right? Or it could be cooling tower. So basically the open loop. So people do not think about the amount of the water which is evaporated with the typical cooling tower. If we are thinking about the 1 megawatt performance, which is not that much, it means every single day we are losing from 10 to 12 tons of water. You need to have that water around, right? You know, just to evaporate that much. So, and such errors, not thinking about the cost of water, killed at least one company, or almost killed, right? So this is a pretty important consideration. There are also considerations for the immersion cooling systems, which is the proper build of the tank, proper saturation of the miners, the choosing of the same rejection device, right? Choosing the right piping material. So there are lots of mistakes to be made, lots of considerations. For example, choosing the right dielectric fluid, which is pretty expensive, but it's critical part of the components of the solution. So there are lots of things you need to think about before you actually buy, or before you go into the megawatt scale installation, megawatt scale implementation. So lots to think about. Now, there's lots of errors. I will just run them through because there's no point to bash the technology, but there are so many errors on the market, like, wrong installation of the pump. So circulation pump being incorrectly installed against any standard, against any manual, right? Or incorrect installation of the heat exchanger. It's happening all the time. Biggest vendors, biggest suppliers offer the heat exchangers which are incorrectly installed, right? There's sometimes everything is wrong, right? Literally everything. Choosing wrong fluid. So choosing the mineral oil instead of synthetic oil, right? That's another issue. And obviously mineral oil is aging so much faster. So that's also pretty important consideration. And that will decide between the operation working great for a decade and the operation which will work on degraded fluid after 1 year, right? And it's happening big time, right? There's a huge difference between quality and the operational standards between synthetic oils, even pretty branded as immersion cooling oils, and between the fully synthetic oils and not mineral oils, right? So there's lots to think about. Another consideration would be to choosing right tank, right? There are lots of cattle through tanks, and they actually all look the same, and they have many flows. And the biggest flaw there is that you cannot achieve proper miner saturation. If you are thinking about immersing the M56 miners, if you are thinking about lots of issues, low quality components, low quality standard, this is what you need to think about before you buy. So not just rely on the nice rendering, but basically talk with the users which use those systems for some time, right? And what they achieve. The biggest problem which we have with the immersion system or immersion tanks is the proper saturation of the system. There's a big problem because current miners require twice the flow than the previous generation. If you were immersing the S19 miner with 3.5 kilowatts capacity, and now you're planning to immerse the system like what's miner M56 with the capacity of, let's say, 6 kilowatts or 7 kilowatts, you need to provide the flow and you need to fully saturate the miner, otherwise you will basically fail, right? And again, there's, as we mentioned, the liquid cooling system is critical part of the solution. You will not run your miners without the system, so it must work perfectly, right? And here you can see, for example, the solution which doesn't deliver proper saturation. So there are areas which are saturated and areas which just lack the flow. And the combination of choosing wrong tank, for example, open tank, which basically takes any dust there is around, and the combination of choosing the wrong fluid results in aged fluid, discolored and not basically to be replaced fluid operating with the, or let's say cooling the precious miners, right? There's lots of also small items which you need to consider. For example, if you want to buy those tanks, those long tanks, and they are available, I know at least one manufacturer which is producing proper long tanks. Just buy the tanks which have lids, because if you have open tanks, the convection of the air from the heated solution takes every bit of the of the dust and contamination, and puts that into the fluid. So it's pretty important to choose the tank which has lids. Simple as that, right? And it doesn't have to be solution from DCX. There are lots of other solutions on the market. You can choose any. Just talk with everybody, learn, and gather as much information as you can. Gather as much experience as you can. So key takeaways from that quick presentation would be: you will have to install either immersion cooling system or liquid cooling system, because in 2 years there will be no miners on the market which have which are running on the air, basically, or those miners will be not efficient anymore, right? If you like to be on the edge, if you like to deliver the result for your investors, you will have to utilize the immersion or hydro-cooled miners. Second one, I beg you, please avoid any problems you may face. So basically run with the standards. There is ASHRAE organization which defined the standards of the liquid cooled systems. Please use the standards, separate the loops. So technical cooling system, facility cooling system. If you choose the tank with the leads to just protect the fluid. So lots of considerations, just avoid the problems. And finally, don't do that by yourself, just find some experts. Give them responsibility, pay them after it's done, right? Simple as that, right? Don't, put yourself into the situation you need to test megawatt-sized, installation, right? Or just run the system or implement the system without previous experience. And finally, obviously, trust no one. That's the, let's say, universal choice, universal approach. Just test, learn, grow, start small, and then just run big, right? If you'll be interested in getting the solution which is small enough to just start small and not invest too much, then we are available. But the most important is ask everybody and then grow. Thank you so much.